welcome to the Always Reading Book Club. It is your girl, Kiki Reader, and we're going to dive right back into our Tangled series. If you haven't already listened to Tangled Up in Ice, which was book 1, and Tangled Up in Pain, which is book 2, I'm going to drop those links down in the description below. And then once you get all caught up, then you can join us for book 3, which is Tangled Up in Lace. So this book starts off with Jackson and Aurora, where they were about to have they're about to have a moment, okay? And so she reaches up to pull his face to hers, and he's looking into her eyes, and he was almost taken back to how it used to be, because he did used to really love her, and sometimes you get swept up in a moment, okay? And that's what kind of happened. But then he remembered how she abandoned their daughter, and that stopped it. That killed that mood quick. So she, of course, wants to know, like, why are you pulling back? Like, what? It's not, what is it? He's like, I have a girlfriend. And he was like, even if I didn't, this isn't going to happen. And so not too long after that is when he hears what sounds like a gunshot. And he initially was like, oh, maybe that's a car, like an old car. And then he's like, let me go check it out. And so when he goes outside, he sees a man pushing a woman in a white van. And so he tries to like run towards the van, and then he hears Harley saying, like, screaming help. So now he knows it's his girl. He's going to get her. And so he can't get to the van in time, because when he runs up and he tries to like pull the door back, he can't open it. It's locked. So he ran back inside to his house to go get his keys. And he tells Aurora, she's like, what's going on? He's like, call the police. He's like, someone just pushed Harley into a white van, and I'm going after him. So as Jackson is following the van, he's on the phone with 911, and he's telling them, what has happened. And then the 911 operator is telling him to like stop following the van, let the police do their job. So he's like, no. He's like, how they gonna do their job if I don't have the license plate number. So how are they gonna know? What do you mean? So then the operator was like, all right, just stay on the phone with me. Don't hang up. So he stays on the phone with the operator, and he tells them the different cross streets whenever they cross them. And then the light turns red, and he thinks he has an opportunity to like get out, and he's going to go and bust a window on the van. I'm like, I don't know how you think you're going to do that in the short amount of time that a light is. But when he was thinking about getting out is when the light turned green. And then he had to like swerve around an SUV to like get closer to the white van. So then there's this huge truck that almost hit the white van, but they turned left really quickly and missed it. But unfortunately, the truck hits Jackson, and then everything goes black. So he then sees Harley in a white dress, and he's trying to talk to her, but she can't see him. She can't hear him. And then he starts hearing a beeping sound, and someone's saying, he's gone. I'm going to call it, like, time of death. And the other woman says, no, let me try one more time. And so he feels a jerk, and then he hears the woman says, I've got a heartbeat. So then we go to Harley. And so while Harley's blindfolded, she yells out, why are you doing this, Parker Huntington? Which I was glad. I was like, yeah, you say his name. Let him know you know who it is. So the other guy yells out, you know her. And Parker was like, yeah, but it doesn't matter. And the other guy was like, yeah, it does. So now Harley's going to try and work this angle with this other guy. So she's like, hey, listen, if you let me go, I won't tell him that anyone else was involved, And Parker, of course, is like, she's lying to you. You can't trust her. So she's thinking she can make headway with him. But then Parker yells out all the guy's information. He's like, his name is Sam. He's in his early 50s. He works for a florist. So the Sam guy was like, why did you do that? And Parker was like, so now she knows who you are as well. And so she was like, shoot, like, because she was trying to work that angle of, his not knowing who he was, maybe he'll like change his mind and like, oh, I'm not gonna do this. But now Parker fixed that real quick. So at this point, she is able to get like the blindfold down like a little bit, because she's like, hell, at this point, since she know his name, she might as well try and get a description of him, because hell, she might as well if she can get away. And so they keep going. They got into a little tussle as they were driving, and then they got okay after that. So then Parker decides to tell well, first the guy said to Sam said to Parker, like, I thought it was just some girl, that you liked. And I'm sitting there going, so you agreed to help someone kidnap someone that they liked? Like, no part of that still sounds okay. But okay, whatever. So then Parker tells Sam about the blog, and the guy Sam was like, you really did all those filthy things? And she was like, no, I'm a writer. I'm good at making up stuff. And so Parker, of course, was like, she's lying. Then Harley yells at him, why are you doing this? And Parker was like, I kept asking you out, and you kept telling me no. He was like, I'm tired of being rejected. So now I'm going to take what I want. So she feels defeated, but then she starts quoting a quote from a movie in the 90s, Dangerous Minds. She starts saying a quote from that movie over and over again. And when they stop the van, Sam comes to the slide door to open it, and she kicks him in the gut with like all her might. And then she jumps out, and she just keeps running, and she keeps running. And then she notices, like, okay, no one's coming. Like, nah, she's got to keep running. And then out of nowhere, boom, she gets knocked to the ground by Sam. And he's pissed. He's like, you shouldn't have made me run, And so then he hits her in the back of the head. Everything goes black for her. So then when they get to the house, Parker makes her go and change clothes. He makes her change it to like a cheerleading outfit. So Sam is like, why do you have her wearing that? I guess now Sam thinks this is getting weird. You didn't think it was weird that he wanted to kidnap a woman? I don't know. That was the first clue. So then Parker describes this girl that he liked in the 9th grade named Sydney Black. And she was a cheerleader, and he was totally crazy about her. And Harley asks him, well, what happened to her? And he's like, she died. And so Harley can tell he's clearly unstable. So she decides like not to ask him any more questions. So then, cause at first she was going to be like, she asked him like, are you trying to make me into her? And he's like, no, you could never be her. So yeah, she knew like, okay, yeah, he's clearly off his rocker. So just don't even say anything else. So then Parker tells her they're going to bed. They're going to the bedroom. Sam is going to sleep on the couch. So then we go back to Jackson. He's in the hospital. Of course, his first question, where's Harley? The doctor tells him, I'll let the cops talk to you about that whole thing. And he, of course, is like now thinking the worst, So then Aurora comes in, and she says, she's been worried. And all he can do is ask her is, do you know anything about Harley? Do you have any more information? And she gets a little upset, But it's like the girl's been kidnapped, You notice this is his whole girl. She's been kidnapped. He's freaking out. Sorry, he can't be like, oh, you're here for me. His brain is on somebody else. You already know that. So it's like, what do you expect? So she lets him know. At first, she wasn't going to tell him anything. And he was like, if you know something, you either tell me or you get out of my room. And so she tells him that they did find the van, but it was unoccupied. They did find Harley's like DNA in there or whatever. But they don't have any leads. So they do know that it belongs to a florist delivery driver named Sam, and they know where he lives. They said his last name, but I can't remember at this moment. They also know that Parker didn't come to work, and no one's seen neither one of them. And they don't have passports, so they're not really necessarily concerned that they're going to be able to leave the country. And but Jackson's like, that ain't enough. You're not doing enough. So he's like, I'm a hire a PI to like dig further, because you guys are not doing enough. So he has Aurora give him her phone because, his is destroyed. And he signs into the cloud, gets to his contacts information, and he calls Harley's dad. And then he asks to speak with her mom, Leslie. And so he calls and tells them, what happened. And at first they were like, we'll look up flights. We'll get there as soon as possible. And he was like, don't worry about it. I'm sending the jet. So they'll get there that day. Leslie and Harold get there. He goes over the story quite a few times because, her mom's in law enforcement. I think she's a state trooper. So they have you, go over the story more than once, not just to see if you're lying, but also sometimes you miss details. So the more you repeat it, normally, more details can kind of pop up. And then he winds up going through the same thing the next morning with the PI. He was getting annoyed, but it's like, listen, however they need to get the information out of you, they're going to get it out of you. So it is what it is. So of course that night before they got there, he had a horrible night. Like his dreams went from marrying the girl to finding her dead body. It was just awful. So then next morning PI arrives, he goes over everything, and he starts to get himself worked up when the police were there, because he was mad with the PIs as well, because he's like, you're not doing any more than the police. And he worked himself up so bad that he passed out. And so when he comes to, Aurora's the only person in the room, and she tells him, it's going to be okay. Leslie's with the PI. She's going to make sure they do their job. So calm down, You're about to make yourself kill yourself. So Harley's trying to think of a way to not have to go to that bedroom with Parker. So she asks Sam, was that your van we were in? And he's like, yeah, why? And she says, because they're going to find the van, and if it's registered to you, they're going to come looking for you, And Harley could kind of tell, once she said that, he kind of looked a little different, wait a minute, and I'm sitting there going, how did you think that wasn't gonna happen, bro? Unless you all torched it. But even if you torched it, some part of it's gonna get left and they'll figure out, who it is. But it's they didn't even torch the van, they just left it, someone's gonna find it, duh. But for some reason, this guy, he wasn't thinking that far ahead. Again, you were okay with kidnapping a woman because he liked her. So you ain't that bright anyway. Let's just be honest. So he, of course, starts thinking and then yells at Parker, that there was a guy that was following him. He could have saw my plate. And so then Harley was like, what? Someone saw us? And Sam was like, yeah, it was a guy that came out of that big house. And he was in a Bentley and he was following us, but he got smashed by that truck. No one could have survived that. So now, of course, she's freaking out because now she's thinking not only could Jackson be hurt, it could be worse. He could be dead. And she's like, oh, gosh, that's a whole nother level to worry about on top of what you're already going through. So she finds that they go in the room. He finds look in the room. So she goes in the room and she's looking around. She's trying to find something she can use. So on the dresser, it was an ashtray, a dish. And when he gets close enough to her, because she can smell his breath, and she bashes him in the face, and he falls back, and she tried to get out of the room, but he yanked her hair and pulled her back and threw her on the bed. And when he tries to get on her, she kicked him with all her might. And he falls back and hits his head on the flat screen TV. So she bolts out of the room. She goes for the front door, but it's dead bolted. So then Parker catches her. He's screaming for Sam. There's no answer. So then Parker whips out the gun. He puts it to her forehead. And he keeps the gun facing her as he backs away because he's trying to check the bathroom to try and see where Sam is, and clearly there is no Sam. So then he's like, shit, So now he's got to go find Sam because he knows Sam's paranoid. What if Sam runs and goes and tells? He's got to go find Sam. So he ties her up with some duct tape, and so he ties her up to a chair with duct tape. And then he goes to find Sam. Harley then makes her way to the kitchen, where she sees the knife on the counter. So then she uses her feet to like kick it off of the counter, lands sideways so she can like cut, like go up